and sullied by us humans, sex is a very good part of human life.
We live our lives in a great deal of hypocrisy, telling our children to do one thing while we do something else.
The quest for control. We all would love it if our lives were a bit more controllable.
Discussions within the Christian community about these questions will be primary for the survival of the Christian community.
Good afternoon to each of you. It is my privilege to be with you, and many of you I had the fun of meeting last year. I've looked forward to this conference for a year because for me it's very much of a respite. And to talk with an audience that is not a secular audience is just a tremendous, tremendous blessing for me. So thank you for showing up this afternoon. And I'd like to, in the spirit of ethics, do something that we've probably all done individually and will continue to do in terms of email, and that is to thank John Kilner and all the center's staff for hosting and all the supporting organizations for putting this marvelous conference together. And that's called, I think, a debt of gratitude in ethics. And I think we could show them your applause as that debt of gratitude. We are grateful to come together and to talk about the ministry. I consider nursing a ministry. If you happen to be a physician, a medical social worker, if you're an exercise physiologist, a PA in this room, whomever you are, I greet you in the spirit of healing. And I'd ask you to stand with me at this point in time. Would you please? Most of us have been sitting for perhaps a week, some of us for 3 days. I'd like everyone to perhaps face to my left, which is this facing, and would you present your tired shoulders to the person in front of you for perhaps just a moment of time. And I'll ask you to switch in a minute. And Scripture says that it's better to give than receive, but I'd ask you to turn around and give what you've received also. I'm going to encourage you to take your seats again if you'd like to. That's right. Ministering to people is always a privilege, and presence is a spiritual gift. And touching someone else, whether that be physically or emotionally or intellectually or socially or spiritually, is always by invitation. And I would hope as you were able to turn to one another and give each other encouragement and comfort, that that's a natural thing that we would see among healers. And yet, very often, the healing environments out of which we practice are sickening. So I'd like to look with you at some very, very practical strategies and greet you in the spirit of richness and diversity that is in this room, and suggest to you that we've been very intellectual, as we appropriately should be, in looking at the issues that have brought us together. But I want to do things a little differently this afternoon and have some fun, and I'm the kind of speaker that walks around. Those of you who were with me last year know that I do that, and please, those of you who don't know me, I call on no one, so don't be afraid of me, okay? But I want to suggest that by experiencing caring for the caregiver, as opposed to just living in our heads and talking about it, that maybe you'll take some strategies home with you that will change some of the environment out of which we work, or even perhaps some family dynamics, and add to the quality of the way we relate to people. I want to suggest to you that one of the ways that I relax and unwind, and it might not be your favorite way, is that I usually have a camera in my backpack, or a camera with me somewhere when I'm privileged to go somewhere and teach and to go on rounds. And with permission, I photograph a lot of people in action in terms of their ministry. And this is what I dug out of the ones I brought with me, but brought it way up front to the slides this afternoon, because this is where my head is after being so stimulated for the number of days that we have been. Lots of times ethics and all the issues present almost a tangled web out of which there is not a lot of clarity initially. And thank God that we have each other to turn to for support and to challenge one another to think. And my part of the challenge in this conference is not just to show pretty pictures, but to suggest that if you do not stay in balance, if you do not know how to care for yourself, you cannot possibly minister to other people over a sustained period of time. Had a physician call me recently. A little girl was dying of her cancer, and understandably he was distressed. And I happened to live right on the ocean on a small island off the coast of Rhode Island. I'm quite sure it's God's favorite island in the whole world. And we are just blessed to live there. And at the end of our conversation, he said, "Thank you so much, because you ground me, not only from an ethics perspective, but in your gentleness and the way you share your faith." And he said, "By the way, what's the name of that CD you have playing in the background? Would you send it to me, please?" It was that beautiful ocean sound. And I don't know how you relax and unwind. Maybe it's my background in swimming. But the closer I am to the water, somehow just the more grounded I am, although that may sound like some kind of an inappropriate metaphor. So I don't know how you take care of yourself. Oh, and my care plan might not work for yours. And simply, as a nurse, I've been taught to write care plans for strangers half my life. So I find myself in academic settings lots of times, and I say to the students, you will be writing plans that are caring and that minister to people that are vulnerable. And I want you to take that responsibility seriously. And physician, you must heal yourself first, Scripture teaches us. Oh, and students never take you seriously unless you grade them. Isn't that true? So I say to students, I will give you 5 extra points on your final exam grade if you submit to me a care plan during this 16 weeks that we're together, a care plan on your own life. Just show me you're taking care. You know how we use that expression, take care, when you hang up the phone or we casually pass each other? They don't take you seriously unless you grade them. So I, if you will, kind of entice them. It doesn't mean you have to swim every day like I think I should. It might not be your cup of tea. But I do know if you do not care for yourself physically, emotionally, intellectually, socially, spiritually, you're not going to be able to minister to other people. So students learn to write care plans, but what better way to write a care plan and learn about that than to begin with yourself? So it's a very simple strategy. And students tell me it's one of the most memorable strategies that they use during the entire semester. So my photography, or maybe my way of relaxing and unwinding, might not be what's appropriate for you, but your job during this part of the closing of this conference is to take a look at your own care plan. Lots of times I have the fun of looking back on land from a vantage of a ship, and many of you know that my husband and I just finished living on our boat for about 1.5 years. It was sort of an early and a forced retirement, but that's a story for another day. But I found that time to be a time of recreation. Look at the word recreation. We now graduate 4-year college degreed individuals in recreational therapy. recreation. And if you only have 3 minutes between maybe seeing one person and walking in and seeing another, how do you somehow get it together? Because maybe it was hard in that room when you were talking with that family. How do you pull it together? Sometimes we have 3 minutes or less. Sometimes we have 30 minutes. And I don't know about you, but there are only 52 Saturdays a year in my world, and I seem to run around trying to catch up from the rest of the week lots of times, and many of those Saturdays I'm on call, just like you. And sometimes I get so out of balance. So to tell you the truth, people usually ask you to speak because you have some kind of expertise. The reason I'm here is because I need this workshop probably just as much as you do. And I'm hoping we have a good time doing it, because there are exercises and simple strategies. How many of you, at times, lead a life on fast forward? Would you raise your hands, please? All right, thank you. You are the experts. And we may want to consult with people that are experts in this room. See, many of us relegate self-care to a very distant second place. And that can make you crazy. It can make you sick. And I'm not just talking physically. If you do that once in a while, see, I have been known to run around on faith and fumes. And I do very well because I've gotten a lot of God-given energy, and I'm grateful for that. Sometimes it's a blessing, sometimes it's more of a burden. But I know that lots of times, when you lead a life on fast forward and you don't take care of yourself, you burn out. Now, I am very tired of that word, burnout. But you know, compassion fatigue is real. Part of my job as an ethicist is to talk with nurses and physicians and other healers that are hurting units, that are tired. And I always go to administration. They're my favorite people. And I say, do you like your nurses? Do you like your doctors? And they say, oh, yes, we do. And I say, well, then did you give them mental health days? See, if you only get sick days, you have to get sick first in order to get a day off. And I have introduced programs throughout the United States that are cost effective, because burnout and turnover and people that cannot engage fully and be present to people, that costs a lot more than just in money. And I've introduced the program, and basically we can nominate each other for wellness days, or maybe someone that is in a management position notices that you're burning the candle at both ends, and they may approach you and suggest that you claim one of your wellness days. And you know what? We now have in nursing mandatory overtime, already doing 12-hour shifts. And we're so short-staffed that we know just who to call. That's why most nurses have answering machines. Come on, talk to me. And we're so stretched beyond our own recognition. On an average day, we meet ourselves coming and going. And I made a comment one time in a workshop, and I said, you know, we're like schizophrenic nudists. And a lady took great offense at that. She said, my son has schizophrenia. Don't you ever address the disabled like that. It taught me a valuable lesson. But I'll tell you, there are days where we're just burning the candle at both ends. I'm asking you to take care and to be a leader in wellness. Because you know what? In the code of ethics, whether it's medicines or nursings, an even higher call than ministry to the sick is to prevent the harm of sickness or illness in the first place. And you know what? We don't pay for that, but we pay for it in a lot of other ways. See, I'd ask you to take care and not be just superficial about your own care plan, because most of us that are really good at caring for other people get a lot back from caring, and we put our own needs on the back bench. Now, I don't know where you draw your energy and how you fill your cup, but I know that if I don't start with the first hour of my day being dedicated to my Savior and trying to pay attention to what I'm to learn in this life, the rest of my day just doesn't unfold. Now, there are lots of days I don't do that, but I try to find that quiet time sometime during the day. And you know, when you're on fast forward and a lot of people are at you, lots of times it's very difficult to do. So I'm asking you, how many of us in this room that are healers know how to put first things first, as Stephen Covey would say? See, here's a philosophical question, although it's not as heady as some of the others. What does it mean to put first things first in your life? And if you put first things first in your life, what would be different about your life and the way you engage in relationships with other people? I think they're philosophical questions in their finest. And lots of times it's easier to look at the more heavier intellectual questions than maybe some of the simple things. I know many of my pictures are from a nursing perspective because much of my audience is often nursing. So I don't dishonor the rest of you that don't happen to come in that profession. But in order to minister to other people, you have to know something, again, about caring for yourself and putting first things first, which is not typical. We glorify people that overwork. We glorify people that set their children aside because their career is so important. I don't know about you, but I never wanted to wake up at 55 and wonder if I'd spent enough time with our daughters. So we tried to do some creative, kind of fun-loving strategies in our house, and I'll share them with you. If you think it came from a postdoc in biomedical ethics at Georgetown, you're mistaken. It was just simple, fun kind of strategies for parenting, to try to have a good time, to try to teach what it means to take care to two little girls. See, even if you're not a nurse, all of us need to know something about self-care and how to certainly look at a care plan. Now, I don't know if your sons and daughters have married yet, but when our younger of our two got married about 2 years ago, she got a very pretty poem. It's on the handouts in your packet, and I read things that sometimes really touch my heart of hearts, and other times it's not all that big of a deal, but read through that poem. It says, relax, unwind, go barefoot once in a while, enjoy the creation. You know, I don't know about you, but I love to kayak. And my favorite time to kayak is when there's a full moon and you go right down that moon path. How can you fail to praise the Creator when you take time to experience the creation? I know plenty of people that go running around and neither see the Creator in the creation nor take time to enjoy it and don't know who to praise anyway. And life is, I think, probably very out of balance. I don't want to be out of balance like that. I'm not leveling a value judgment at someone else. I'm just saying I'm working hard trying to stay in balance. Dare to dream. That popped out at me when I read that poem. I think his name was Martin. And he said, I do have a dream where God's vision for people as being truly made in his image, and it doesn't matter what shape you come in and what abilities or non-abilities you have or the color of your skin. And you know, God was merciful, even though he knew Martin would die for his beliefs. He was merciful because apparently he went to a situation either in his prayer life or his quiet time, and he said, I have been on top of that mountain and I have seen this vision. I think it was merciful that he got to experience that before he died. It must have shored him up in order to minister to other people. Oh, I know he wasn't perfect. No one else in this room is the fourth member of the Trinity either. He made serious human judgment errors in relationships, perhaps, but he had a vision. What's your vision in terms of caring and taking care of people? See, dare to dream. I don't know. I didn't have as profound a vision. I can tell you a simple dream. Tom and I had it. We had cared for people for a long time. My husband's in full-time health care also, although more on the administrative level. And we always thought, wouldn't it be really, really neat if we could live on a boat? Now, that might not be what you think is a way to relax and unwind. Maybe you're scared to death of the water, but I shared with you that's my favorite way to relax. Dare to dream. I can tell you at the end of a clinical day that's been very demanding, when I get on the bow of that boat and look down the rest of the dock, and it's a very different lifestyle. And if you can downsize to 55 feet after 33 years of marriage, you have learned a powerful spiritual lesson that material things don't matter. And you're not going to get there by hanging on to those things. You've got to search more deeply for meaning and purpose and truth in your life. We had accumulated a lot of things. I'll tell you, I like nice things. I'd be a liar if I said I didn't. But they do not define me. But you know what? One of our dreams was to live on a boat. And we did for about 1.5 years. And I cannot tell you how much more refreshed I am this year than I was the previous maybe 4 or 5 years. Now, maybe that's not something that's within the scope of your ability to do. I'm asking you, what can you do to take care of yourself? We're not ready for retirement either. And I don't think I will retire from what I consider to be an art as well as a science and a ministry. Oh, I know the rest of us have sciences and arts and ministries. It's not just nursing. But I do know that we come in all sorts of packages. See, I'm a member of a street gang in nursing. It's basically parish nursing, and we wear all sorts of different things. And the men and women on the docks in the harbors are the people that we unite with and we minister to. And I know we come in all sorts of packages, but you know what? You got to stay healthy in order to be able to have enough energy to care for them. You know, most of us in this room that were nurses, and if you're a nurse, would you raise your hand just to kind of identify yourself with the other people? Do you remember, those of you who are nurses, that textbook we had? It was called The Fundamentals of Nursing, was it not? Tell your colleagues about those books and about the professor that you secretly thought was brain dead. Come on, Fundamentals of Nursing. There was not even 1 hour spent in the average curriculum on caring for yourself. Not one chapter in a book until I wrote what I wrote, because I felt I was inspired to write that. In fact, there was not one book in nursing talking about self-care. Oh, it sounds a little bit too humanistic, perhaps, but I'm not asking you to draw how you draw self-care from a worldly perspective. I'm asking you, how do you fill your cup that is loving in order to minister to other people from a spiritual perspective in order that you can care more fully? There are a lot of us that probably wish we had stock in Prozac. Now, maybe this seems like a funny little slide to you, but it's got a story behind it. His name is Brian Mensch. He was one of the most famous hand surgeons in the United States of America. God gave him another gift in addition to being a wonderful healer. He has a gift of humor. And you know what? There was so much in medicine and in the system that got in the way. He finally just gave up. He said, I'm out of here. I can't do this anymore, but I'm going to use my gift in another way. And he happened to have founded a card company, In Your Face Cards, it's called. But he's got a wonderful and delightful way of helping people heal from a humor perspective. Now, I'm not suggesting you drop out of medicine or whatever else you're doing, but this was Brian's way of coping. I wish he had had some other strategies also. But the bottom line is, before you can engage fully and be present to people and help them heal from a holistic perspective, you've got to know something about caring for yourself. If you think I would be stupid enough in front of a secular audience to say this is just pop art psychology, I wish you knew me better. Even when it's a secular audience, I talk to them about the ministry of Jesus Christ. And you know, some people call me up and they say, hi, I want you to do a keynote for us, but I want you to talk about that Christ stuff. I'll go, well, you're just going to have to find yourself another speaker because it's going to leak right out. Because in fact, it's part of exactly how I see the world and how I serve. Love your neighbor as yourself. Matthew 22, it says, love your God with your whole heart and spirit and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. Oh, you know what that means? Not more than, not less than. Some people really mess that message up. I don't care whether they're secular or they're profoundly spiritual. Some of us don't get it. And you know, when you love your neighbor as yourself, you realize the word as means equal to. Not more, not less, but some of us really don't know an awful lot of that balance in our lives. And I'd ask you just to consider this prayerfully and put first things first in your life. Some people will hear what I'm saying, as if it's selfishness, as if it's humanistic. And I am not talking from that perspective for 1 second. Now, those of you who know me a little bit in this room know that the best way I could have been introduced, aside from being a Christ follower and a nurse, is that I happen to be a grandmama. Isn't that just the coolest thing? Our daughter called us recently. She says, Mama, do you want to know who the baby is? She's about 25 weeks pregnant. And I said, sweetheart, whenever you find out, because she was asking, should I know, should I not know? What do you think, Mom? I said, well, I don't know. I didn't have the option. And I guess you and Scott should make that decision. That's your call. And she said, well, Mom, and I was just about to walk in to do an address, group of very sophisticated neurology kind of physicians. She says, do you want to know who he is? You know, God's known this baby from before time, knows everything about this child. My husband keeps saying, and he's a profound believer, he keeps saying, sweetheart, you're not a grandmother yet, calm down. I plan to make this the most exciting time of our lives. But you know what? I'm going to have to stay in balance. So some career things are going to have to be set aside in order to be present to our grandson. I don't know how you balance things in your life, different claims on your time, but we all have 24 hours a day, no more, no less. And sometimes we pass up the most marvelous things. Before our grandson, this was Bailey. See, Bailey is our grandpuppy, and I'm quite sure she's just the most wonderful grandpuppy. And someone that knows I love Bailey very much sent me an email. I won't bore you with the whole thing, but I'll read you a couple of captions. It's entitled, Things You Can Learn from a Dog. See, you thought I was going to quote a lot of scripture, didn't you? I can. I know where I draw truth, but I also know truth is truth wherever you find it. And this very simple email really just caught my attention. It started out something like this. It says, never pass up the opportunity to go for a joyride. When's the last time you just went for a joyride? Not to go to the pharmacy to pick something up, not to go to the dry cleaners. When's the last time you maybe did a special person day and allowed one person in your family to be the author of the day for the rest of the people? We used to do kind of silly things like that. I miss that because our daughters are married and off on their own, and I'm looking forward to a new stage of being crazy again. Don't ever pass up the opportunity. The joy of the Lord is your strength. We know that joy. But what about just enjoying our living in addition to all the conundrum of things we have to do? Oh, there was another thing that kind of caught my attention. It says, when loved ones come home, always run to greet them. Does that define your behavior? 24/7? No, come on. Am I the only one here that's dysfunctional and sometimes takes it out on the persons that I love the most? See, directly proportional to how in balance I am is often, I'm ashamed to admit, how I treat other people. And the man I say I have a lifetime relationship with and commitment to, sometimes I'm not very nice. It shouldn't surprise any of us in here, but it has to do with whether I've stayed in balance or not. Oh, I'll just read one more. It says, when someone's having a bad day, sit beside them quietly, nuzzle them gently, and maintain your silence. Things you can learn from a dog. Oh, maybe it isn't exactly the truth you expected to hear this afternoon, but you know what? It is such common sense, it's pitiful. And you know what? Common sense ain't all that common for a lot of us, lots of times when we're stretched. And very simply, if you've got other strategies that work better for you, fine. But that dog knew more about relaxation, recreation, and knowing how to relax and unwind than any single member of our family. Our children lived with us shortly after they were married. Why? It's cheaper. And it was a wonderful blessing, actually, because we got to know Scott and got to know who they were as a married couple as well as a dating couple. It was wonderful, and we got to have that grandpuppy. She spent more time at that pool And I thought, why are we running around trying to pay for the chlorine in this pool and we never use it? Do you ever find yourself so on fast forward that sometimes you don't take time to just enjoy your life and to gain some strength from that and relax and unwind? The God of the universe created an entire period of time for relaxation and recreation. How hard it is to teach kids, no, we don't run to the mall and shop on Sundays. They didn't like me very much when I suggested Sunday was a day of recreation for family commitments, for time, and we weren't going to fall into the trap like a lot of other people did. Oh, I'm not criticizing other people if they do it. I just don't want to forget that God said, hi, take a break. And you know what? When I'm with a secular audience, I try to be inviting about Christian principles, but not too in your face. So I tell a little story about Jesus knew it was going to be a tough day at the HMO, so he went out to the desert to pray first and get connected with his Father in order that he put first things first and then could minister to other people. And I tell them another story that blew me away when I first heard it. That Christ was in the middle of a lot of people that needed him. And he was tired. And he walked away. And you know what? Some of us don't know when to say when. And that's more than just a beer commercial, don't you think? How do you teach your children to stay in balance? And how do you try to stay in balance in a family? Compassion fatigue is very real. Part of my job as an ethicist is to do support groups for physicians and nurses and other care providers in order that they can regain some of the energy that it takes to minister to other people. Compassion fatigue is very, very real. And there's a lot of literature just starting to come out. You cannot minister to other people by being distant. And in compassion fatigue people, the first thing they report to us is that they try to throw up a wall in order to guard themselves against feeling too deeply. You cannot minister to people when you have a wall and you're trying to retreat. So I'd caution you to take care. Again, see this nurse right here? She's 22 years old, okay? Now, some of you are saying, you're nuts, lady. No, actually, she is our director of nursing. Well, that was sort of back in the 80s when she retired. Her name is Ms. Miriam Rand. She dedicated her entire life to nursing in the days when you weren't supposed to get married and weren't supposed to do anything else but. And she ran that hospital and many physicians as you would expect an old-time director of nursing would. But you know what? She knows the love of the Lord. At 92 years of age, behind me, and she says, if you don't have your hat on, you don't have your brains engaged. So she still wears her hat. But she shows up at that AIDS clinic for those babies that no one else wants to minister to because they're cast-offs. And she has that kind of energy. She used to say to me, sweetheart, you're burning the candle at both ends. And in my arrogance and my youth, both of which have left me, I'm proud to say. I really mean that. I wouldn't trade this time of life for anything. You have to have life experience to know what we know. And in my arrogance and my youth, she used to say, you're burning the candle both ends. And I would say, oh, but what a lovely glow. And she'd say, you have a responsibility. You are a Christian nurse. You are a leader. You've had the privilege of education. But you've got to take care. And you do not know a thing about that, sweetheart. She is still one of my best friends. See, you can do pop art psychology. You can draw truth from Scripture and your faith. Or you might get lucky in your life and have a role model. My mom, many of you know, she's a nurse. She wasn't a real nurse. She was an administrator. So let's just get that on the table right now and just talk about it. My grandmother was a nurse, too. She was a psych mental health nurse, so she didn't count either, right? But they had strong messages to me about caring for myself. Here's how they sounded. Get your work done, and then you can go play. See, if this were a longer workshop, I'd have you break down into small groups, and I'd ask you to write a list of all the self-care messages that you got as a kid, growing up. Or maybe you inflict on yourself now. My grandmother, wonderful woman, you'd loved her. She would say things like, put your shoulder to the wheel, your nose to the grindstone. That's a pretty funky way to work, don't you think? Come on, talk to me. And I had lots of messages about putting off taking care of myself, and sometimes you get very out of balance. So I'm asking you, who are your role models? The Code of Ethics says clearly, we are to prevent illness. We are to, in fact, reinforce people's wellness. And you probably have to walk it as well as talk it. I don't pose as if I have that expertise in wellness yet, but I'm working on it. Oh, and I fly all the time on US Air, preferably. I have a lot of mileage, and I get to upgrade for very inexpensively. And they have this message when things get turbulent. They say there'll be a yellow cup that comes out of the overhead bin ahead of you. Don't you wish you had a yellow cup when life gets turbulent? You do. It's called Jesus Christ. Where do you fill your well when times are tough? How is it that you are able to draw on the strength that's available to us? Some of us don't naturally do that as a first resource. We do it as a last resource. I ask patients lots of times, is faith important to you? Because, see, talking about people's spirituality is by invitation. Is faith important to you? And when I get a response, I'll ask them, tell me something, help me understand you better. Is it a first resource or a last resource for you? Because then I find out something about their self-care. Oh, US Air, it says, put your own oxygen mask on first, and then care for other people around you. You know what? I'll bet you I know, even though I don't know many of your first names, I'll bet you I know how you'd handle this. Things are rocking and rolling up there, and you're a healer. You'd be up out of your seat saving the plane, right? And you know what had happened? You drop because you hadn't done first things first. See, this is just common sense. And a lot of people do the motions of caring for other people, but their heart isn't in it. Their spirit isn't in it. And people sense that difference. That is not the spiritual gift of presence which we're called to bring. You can't possibly, again, minister to other people without knowing something about self-care. Now, maybe you're hearing this as, gee whiz, putting yourself first is selfishness. I'd suggest to you that it is a form of self-respect. If you're way out of balance and you're always putting yourself first at everyone else's expense, then you're a hedonist. I'll say it like it is. You're out of balance. Remember that old California mentality by Fritz Perls? I'm not in this world to live up to your expectations. Oh, really? You must come from a different planet. But in fact, the whole world seemed to buy into it. He said, I'm not here to live up to your expectations. And if in fact we connect, gee, that's really nice. I don't want to live by that philosophy. So I'm inviting you to remember just some simple strategies that maybe we'll have a good time doing in a few minutes on just simple things about self-care. If you think it's a luxury, I'm suggesting to you it isn't. It's an absolute necessity for those of us who are committed to full-time ministry and full-time healing. My sister happens to be a sonographer. She's very good at what she does. She's got a healer's heart. And she's got a similar genetic line, and I wouldn't expect nothing less than the best from her. But she often bends over in this position, has kind of a kink in her back, and she called me crying recently. And I explored with her just simple things. Given she was on a 6-day more stretch and already had been on about 5 days, what can you do to take care, Carol? What can you do just in the little bit amount of time that you have between tonight that you've gotten home and you're on the phone with me and tomorrow morning at dark 30 when you have to be in? What can you do to take care? Well, one of the strategies came up with was maybe she would seek massage because she was so stiff all the time. Now, she can't do that between the time she comes on tomorrow, but you know, we engaged my mom in this conversation about Carol was working real hard and didn't seem to be in balance, and my mom's reaction to the massage as a strategy, physically, in addition to many other strategies, was that, in fact, that was a luxury. Oh, why are you wasting your money on something like that? Actually, it was one of the most practical things my sister could have done, in addition to putting first things first and committing the first hour of her day to the Lord. I don't know how you stay in balance, but you are a healer. You are called to care. You are called to heal, and you can't possibly do that over time unless you put first things first and take care of yourself. Presence, again, is a spiritual gift. So I don't know if it's because I'm well into my mid-50s or some other phenomenon in my life, but I don't want to lead a life on faith and fumes or some kind of a balancing act. I want a balanced life, and that certainly involves spiritual and emotional and intellectual, social and physical kind of qualities. Now I want to do some exercises. Some of you know I'm a swimmer. I'm not talking about those kind of exercises. I'm talking about we've been sitting for a number of days. Most of us are tired, and I'd like to engage you more than just talking at you. But before I do, I'd like to propose a wellness strategy. One of the objectives was I would talk about just maybe a couple of wellness strategies. Simple strategy, no put-downs. You know how effective that is if you have the privilege of being a nurse manager in a critical care unit with 34 beds and an $18 million budget? You know, see, one of the things we know is that sometimes we tend to criticize more than we praise one another. See, it's easier to criticize than give the gift of encouragement, and that's why Scripture calls affirmation or praise the gift of encouragement. But one of the ground rules we would lay down in the unit is no put-downs. People don't dump on each other. You thought the dumping syndrome was after somebody had a gastrectomy, right? No. Sometimes people use each other as a means to an end. We say that's a violation of something very special in ethics. But people shouldn't dump on each other, but we often criticize each other unnecessarily. I try to conduct my life in such a way that if I'm talking about somebody, I make believe they're right beside me, because it kind of tends to keep me very honest. And it's easier to put somebody down than it is to praise them lots of times. To find the one thing wrong that we didn't like about the conference or that speaker, and not concentrate on the affirmation. So I'm inviting you to look at this put-down rule. You know what? If the Bosnians and Serbs honored this rule, there wouldn't be any ethnic cleansing. I'm quite sure. It's so simplistic. It's so simplistic. It's the easiest thing going. Don't put yourself down. Don't put other people down. And if somebody puts you down, yes, turn the other cheek is a wonderful thing, but you serve a risen Savior that said enough and drove people from a temple when people were out of balance. Don't put yourself down. Don't put other people down. And if people put you down, because there's always somebody on your left and right quite prepared to do that, you might want to just say, ouch, that bothered me, that hurt my feelings, and own it and call them to accountability. See, a lot of people think turn the other cheek means being a wimp, but it doesn't. It means, hi, that hurt me. You had no right to do that. I'm made in the image of God. I bear his image. You ought to honor that. Some people don't know that. And sometimes we ought to be bold enough to say, that bothered me a lot. So when we hear a racial joke, we should probably never buy into it and confront the person that shared it in a loving way. But you know, a lot of people just say, ooh, I don't want to get too involved after all. And then they'll teach you this in the world. Sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Ask your friends who are people of color if names don't hurt, and I'll just shut up, okay? Put-downs hurt. They're the root of a lot of evil. And I'd invite you, don't put yourself down, don't put other people down, and there's nothing that will impair people, even though that happens to be my grandmother's picture. There's nothing that will impair a person faster than feeling poorly about themselves. You know where you get your self-concept, self-esteem from the way you are viewed by your Creator, by the invitation that we have to be in communion with the Trinity. And our self-concept, self-esteem isn't a wishy-washy thing that is balanced on what other people say, but the world doesn't know that. But we're still in the world, even though we're separate from it, and sometimes when people put us down, it hurts. You might want to simply say, that bothers me. See, I have a very good friend, a very close friend. I love her so much. When our children were younger, and she still is, their godmother, but we asked her, if anything ever happened to us, would you please help us in the following ways. Now, BJ is married to a gentleman that I stopped dating about the 4th grade, Chris. Why? He was a put-down artist. He was a very negative man. My husband doesn't do that to me. He honors me. My husband would never beat me. I work with battered women. My husband would never beat me, put me down. He wouldn't live. No, I'm only kidding. But basically, he wouldn't do that to me. But some people don't lead their lives that way. I don't know what it is about their communion as a couple, but he's always like this. And she's my friend, and as friends talk, she bears her soul to me, and she is growing to her full potential. Do you know what I mean? Here's what I mean. Here's my diagnosis as a nurse. She finds more comfort in food than she does in the arms of her husband. That's sad. And she's my friend. And we're over at their house at dinner. It should be a joyful time, nourishing for the soul as well as the body. And the whole time it's about the chicken and about the sauce and yada-da. And you know, it's easier to criticize than it is praise. I said, is there anything you like about this dinner? My husband under the table. And on the way home, I got lecture number 101 about being a good wife and a good friend. And he said to me, what gives you the authority to speak to a man in his own home like that? You know what? My friend is whispering it to me. She says, yeah, you love her. And you know that that's a put down, and it's not right. Listen, this is common sense, folks. But you know how often you see it and hear it? What are the last 10 things we said to our kids? What are the last 10 things we said to somebody we don't like? See, I have no problem with love your neighbor as yourself as long as I like my neighbor. It's the people that are the nerds in my life that I really struggle with, okay? I'm admitting it. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's a tall order for a contemporary Christian. And you know, I do a lot better if I stay in balance when I'm confronted with somebody who's fairly toxic. I try to give my friend talk time, but there's nothing that impairs people faster than put-downs. This is my favorite that I hear my colleagues say. I'm just a nurse. I'm only a nurse. And in honor of the physicians who are here, I do not put you down saying this, but I got to give this example. In 35 years in nursing, I have never seen a physician introduce him or herself like this. I'm only a physician. We just don't do it. We don't acculture people like that. We don't regard them like that. We play a different game. Even the way we discipline one another in the average institution is quite different. What I want to suggest to you is, and I don't know why the clicker won't work anymore, but it may be the Lord's way of saying, look, get on with it, let him stand up and do an exercise. I might need a battery also, so I'm going to evoke scripture and say 2 are better than 1, and I need some help. So if somebody could just maybe give me this clicker with a little reinforcement, or maybe, given I'm standing right on top of the machine, it doesn't seem to want to perform anymore. Tony, thank you. I can use this for just a moment. So just in recapping, before we do the first exercise, I want you to buy into this ground rule. It's real simple, I know. And I'm taking a lot of time on it, but I think it's so pervasive that lots of times we miss the point. So simply, don't put yourself down, don't put other people down, and if somebody puts you down, you might want to address it in a very straightforward way. We are taught that the tongue is like a two-edged sword, and yet we are to use our tongue to edify people, to edify ourselves, not for our own glory, but for the Lord's, and definitely to use it in the way of encouraging one another. But lots of times that does not happen. Now what I'd like you to do is stand up once again. Would you please? Some of you are probably saying, uh-oh, I don't know what she's got up her sleeve. I have a 35-inch arm, and it got me where I needed to go at one point or another in my swimming, and I'm not exercising any hidden agenda. I'd just like to get you up, move you around a bit, give you a little exercise while I get some audiovisual kind of help. And I'd like you to introduce yourselves, even though you may know the person on your left or right, in a little bit of an artificial way, but blame it on me. If you don't want to participate, don't. We tell our children that lots of times, but I think you'll learn more a little bit if you do, and I'd like you to do this. Hi, my name is Diann Uustal. Extend your hand to someone behind you or around you. You will not, of course, use my name unless you're totally exhausted. Hi, my name is whoever, and if you were to know me over time, one of the things you'd like best about me is, one of the things you'd appreciate most about me is, I lost it on that one.
Should I say what my wife would say? Or
Thank
what I
you,
would
David.
say?
Yeah.
David Crane.
Hi, David. I'm sorry to have kind of lost that. I know I'm taped. I have noticed you, your matching shoes, your matching whole outfit. You are beautiful.
Honey, I'm 71. And my generation, we
Are
match
you
everything.
serious?
We match everything.
You are beautiful.
Oh,
I
thank
hope
you.
I grow up to be like you. You are stunning. I thought you were my age, like 50. You're beautiful, inside and out, I'm sure.
You know, the fourth thing up there is I don't allow people to put other people down in front of me.
Good.
I have to stop. I have to say, you know, that hurts me when you spoke to Diann that way. That hurts me when you spoke to Dennis that way.
And that's
That hurts
important
me.
that's important to be able to do. Yeah. Is it working?
Well, I've got reverse to work, but forward isn't.
Oh, come on. It's hard enough.
Okay,
But you know what? That gets so awkward and so hard. Yeah.
It's reverse.
You still can't do it? It won't go at all?
Just a second.
Okay.
Okay, you're all warming up.
No, it won't go for me.
Now-
Oh,
now
now
this
it did.
one.
I wonder why.
I don't know, but
All right.
when I pressed it, so
Okay. Thank
The
you.
battery's charged.
Thank you. I'd like to interrupt your conversations and ask you to get comfortable again, if you would, please. I know that's as artificial as it comes, but I just wanted to change the atmosphere just a bit and also engage you in a bit of a conversation. It's been my experience as a nurse and also in reading the literature that lots of times people don't remember the healers that are involved. And we have a program in our hospital that allows the emergency and the trauma nurses, because often they don't know the results of their efforts, to go to other units and meet people whose lives they obviously changed, rescued, saved. And we have for the administrative staff that's young, a walk a mile in our shoes program, because it's easy for a bean counter, I say it sensitively. It's easy for someone to cost analyze caring, but if you're a healer, you know that it takes time to introduce yourself, to draw out conversation with a person. The average HMO, the average physician sees a patient every 10 minutes, and that's exceptional amount of time. You can't possibly minister to people in that compressed kind of atmosphere. So I try to teach my students very unusual strategies for introducing themselves. Hi, my name is Diann. Brian, I'm one of the nicest nurses you're ever going to meet, but you know what? Just about everything my students and I do hurt in this burn unit. See, Brian is 9 years old, and just about everything we do hurts him. I've got to gain his trust. See, trust is a gift I gave Bill Clinton. It's also something he needed to earn. How do I earn trust in a very short period of time with someone that, in the name of caring, I'm hurting a lot often, many times? So we try to say, look, nothing's going to happen to you while you're on your bed. And I gave this example to the group I was speaking with the other day about the ethic of care. How do you prove that you're a caring person? Hi, if you knew me well, you'd know that I'm passionate about nursing. I'm genuine about being a caring person, but in the name of caring, I do some pretty terrible things to human beings. He's 9 years old. He's lost control. He doesn't have his parents by his side. He's been burned beyond recognition. Why someone would light a child on fire because he refused to sell drugs, I don't know. But I've seen what's left over. And when we walk into his room, we've made him a solemn promise. What's a promise that you've made to a patient? We've made a promise to him not to hurt him, to help him heal. But sometimes in order to heal, you got to hurt people within reason. And when do you have the right to hurt a little boy in order to help him heal when he doesn't understand all that? Hey, I'm an adult care practitioner, okay? I just wanted to level with you. I don't do peds real well, and I don't like the burn unit, the way it smells, what we do. But I get asked as an ethicist to write policy. I wrote a policy for that peds unit. It says no owies in the bed. Don't you think that's cool for an adult person to get into a kid's shoes? No owies in the bed. It means when you're in your bed, nobody can hurt you, Brian. But when we take you to the treatment room, sweetheart, we're going to do things that in the name of caring for you might hurt, and we're going to allow you to maybe reach over and hold somebody's body part so you can squeeze and let us know. Stop for a moment, please, just give me my breath. And we'll give you as much control as we possibly can. That's the art and the ethic of care. But you know what? A care practitioner came in one morning and said, I don't have time to take this kid to the treatment room, and started just debriding that wound. I thought it was insensitive, but I could read the exhaustion on his face. He said, I don't have time to play your kitty care games. I thought it was an insult, but you know, you can turn the cheek sometimes. It just shouldn't have been that way, should it? But he was tired. But that's what happens when people get out of balance. We've got ground rules that say, hi, you're supposed to help people and benefit them more than burden them. That was a distinct burden for that little boy. I'm asking you, how do you stay in balance in the face of some of the things you see? See, I could tell you lots of different stories. I won't do that. I'm just asking you, how did you introduce yourself? Thank you for your help. We'll have to cut a deal about the honorarium or something. Thank you. But how do you introduce yourself when you get a chance? How do you engender trust in 30 seconds or less? And I'm asking you to think about that as creatively as possible, long after this session is over. But I want to know, not how you introduced yourself when I asked you to talk with each other and you've been together for a few days, but I want to ask you instead, how did you feel? Just anybody. Could you volunteer? How did you feel? Anybody. There should be a free t-shirt for the person who goes first. I'm sorry there is none. But how did you feel when I asked you to do this? Anybody? It was okay. Yeah. That was nice, dude. I didn't know what she had up her sleeve. I didn't know if I wanted to give you this gift of trust, Uustal. You got to earn it. Yeah, amazing. We're so intimate with people. We're so incredibly intimate, physically, emotionally. We ask them the most awesome, awesome questions and invade their privacy. But I'm asking you just to introduce yourself. You who talks to comatose patients, to introduce yourself, and I'm asking you, how did you feel? Somebody else, how did you feel? Connected. Thank you. Somebody else. Awkward. Sure. How did you feel? Anybody?
Good, because I like learning from people at these conferences.
Good. I like learning, and I like learning from other people at conferences, so I felt comfortable about it. One more person. How did you feel? Uncomfortable? Yes? Vulnerable. Yeah. Revealing something about yourself? Yeah. Psychologists teach us that lots of times if we're not transparent, we're not willing to reveal things about ourselves, other people don't want to do it either. But what were we taught in school lots of times? Don't talk about yourself. Now, if it's out of balance, obviously it's out of balance. But if you reveal nothing about yourself, people aren't going to open up to you either. I would suggest to you that there's a quote that I read a long time ago because I asked you how you feel. And the quote is a very simple wellness kind of principle. It says, no one can make you feel anything without your permission. Eleanor Roosevelt, in addressing an audience of women, said, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. How many of our children in schools, perhaps, grow up and they hear messages from people in authority and then begun taking on that notion of who they are because someone else labeled them in a certain way? It's a very famous story about a very young, inspiring teacher. They said, well, she's in her first year. We'll give her all the real difficult kids to deal with. And so the principal came into the school and gave her a list of all the person's scores and told her that she was so idealistic she could take care of all these kids and do just fine. Later on in the semester, he came back in and saw these kids vibrant and excited and full of life and learning and engaged. And he said, how did you do this? This is miraculous. I gave you all their scores. And she said, oh, I thought those were the locker numbers. See, potential and living to your full potential sometimes is squashed by the world because the world likes to brand and name people. No one can make you feel anything without your consent is a very hard lesson for a second grader, but you can teach it to people very simply, maybe even as early as that second grade. No one can make you feel anything unless you give all your power away, and your power does not emanate just from self. But you know, when I asked you, how did you feel? I want to take it on a different level. There's a person I have a little bit of conflict with in my life. I'm not proud of it. I'm trying to resolve it. And she delights in putting me down. No one can make me feel anything without my permission. It's a wellness strategy. It's a faith exercising principle, too. So when she attacks me, I can turn the other cheek because there are about 30 human emotions, and if I choose to react to her out of anger, that's my choice. I have to be accountable for that. And you know what? I can choose to be loving. I can choose to be forgiving. I can choose not to dishonor her with a put down. No one can make you be anything that you do not choose to be. And you're accountable for the things you do and for the things you don't do. But you know what? When we're out of balance and we're tired, sometimes we forget common sense. I'm asking you to pay attention to a very simple wellness kind of concept. No one can make you feel inferior or any other emotion. Thank you. Quite simply, if you pay attention to what you say to yourself, out of your heart, you so speak also to other people. If you're busy putting yourself down and you're harsh on yourself, we find out very quickly that people tend to be very critical of other people. Two things happen. The person that's critical of themselves suffers, and people around them suffer. So I ask you just simply pay attention to your own self-talk and pay attention to that wellness concept. See this gentleman behind me? He happens to be a surgical tech in our hospital. His name is Luis, and you know, I never saw his eyes for the first couple of weeks that I was on that rotation. He always was walking with his head down, and he seemed to have a very self-effacing attitude toward himself, and it just didn't seem that he could possibly exercise his full potential in a state of mind like that. So the team and I went out of our way for just a week to simply validate him every time we saw him. Now, people know when they need to put on their boots. Validation, affirmation, the gift of encouragement has got to be sincere, it's got to be timely, it's got to be truthful. And what we did is we validated in a very different way than the world does. See, if you praise the person for the performance, even an Olympic athlete will have a bad day. And then what have you got to say when they need your encouragement? So if you learn to praise the person and not just the performance, you find very quickly that is the distinction between the gift of encouragement and the world's notion of what affirmation or encouragement is. We went out of our way to say things like, Luis, one of the things that makes me proud to be your colleague. Luis, one of the things I like best about working with you is, Luis, when you talked to that woman the other day, I saw the love of the Lord in your heart. Are you a Christ follower? See, it was an opening. I don't know who you are, I don't know how you talk to people, but you know what? He walks very differently, simply because of the gift of affirmation. There is not one of us in this room that doesn't want to feel good about ourselves. And out of feeling good about yourself isn't just you stop there so you can feel full of self-concept, self-esteem, but it strengthens you and shores you up in order to minister to other people. Learn to talk nicely to yourself. Learn to talk nicely to other people and pay attention to what it is that we give each other as a gift of encouragement as we come alongside. Now there's a handout in your packet I'd love you to turn to if you would. It happens to be about 3 pages in. It's real simple. You'll know you're on the right page if you have your packet because it says caring for yourself, caring for others, a balancing act or a balanced life. And I'd just like you to, maybe with the person on your left or right, just share with them for a few minutes and allow them to do that with you. Some of the things that you're doing typically to take care. What do you do to take care of yourself, just typically? And would you also share with them some of the things that typically throw you out of balance? You can count on my interrupting you in just a couple of minutes, but I hope you'll share that with each other. I don't know what's going on, but I do thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks.
I hope I was picking up on your cues.
Thank you. When I just thought I'll look over at you, I appreciate you doing that. So I know you probably want to talk with people too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sure. They are going to share with each other.
He says
You're
doesn't need to be. I take care of him.
Do you know, it might be a terrible gender-related statement to say, but men have mothers and then they often have good wives. You've been blessed twice.
Yep.
Simple, but something we forget all the time, don't you think?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like so easy to talk about, so much more difficult to do on a daily basis. Yeah, it's
I
crazy.
think for me the problem is, or the struggle is, I get caught up in the busyness,
Yes.
the busyness of life, and you know, every day running here, running there, got to do
It's
this.
tough,
gotta do
isn't
that.
it?
You lose sight of the bigger picture.
Yeah,
Totally.
you do, and it makes you nuts. It makes you nuts.
Oh yeah.
John?
How are we doing? I've been here the whole time since the last
Yes,
2 minutes.
I
It's
saw
been beautiful.
I saw you.
It's been
Now
beautiful.
tell me something. It's
Yeah.
4:05. I'd like, with your permission, to interrupt you, if I may. I'd like actually to interrupt you without your permission, but this is an ethics kind of institute also. In the amount of time that we have, you can't possibly get into the exercises, but if this were a longer workshop, I can tell you from personal experience that people love to engage in dialogue and share ideas. And if we had more time, I'd ask you in much more detail, what do you do to take care of yourself? What do you typically do? Not unusually, once in a while when you remember, but what do you typically do? And what I'd like to do is just whip around the room a little bit and just get a feel for what do you do to take care of yourself? Any of you. Someone start me off, would you? Yes.
I always underline the word always take the Sabbath day off.
All right.
I never work on Sunday. Ever, ever, ever.
All right. Did you hear that?
Other than as a physician where I'm required to do so, but other than that,
All right.
never.
The truth comes out, but he says, I want to qualify this, so let's listen.
I am a psychiatrist, so obviously I don't have to go to the hospital, but I do accept phone calls on a Sunday.
All right.
If I haven't trained my patients right.
If I haven't trained or educated my patients right, I usually am available, but not on a Sunday. Thanks for starting us off. All right, Diann.
Exercise and sports.
What's your favorite?
Tennis.
All right, you good at it?
That depends on who you compare me with. Compared to Pete Sampras, I'm pretty...
You're pretty good?
Well,
I know you're a great speaker because I learned from you yesterday.
oh, well, that's very gracious of you to say that.
It's the truth.
Well, thank you.
Somebody else. What do you do to take care? Garden. Garden, yeah. My children often have found me outside very early in the morning, and they say, what are you doing? 5 o'clock in the morning, Mom. They're getting up for swim team. That's my gardening with God time. So maybe you combine quiet time. I'm one of those kinesthetic people that sometimes my quiet time is on my knees. Sometimes it's gardening with God. Glad you shared that, Wanda. Somebody else, what are you doing to take care, typically? Yes?
Pour a cup of coffee and call one of my kids long distance.
Call my kids long distance, pour a cup of coffee, chat with them a while. Do you do it collect, or could I ask? Okay. All right. Somebody else, what do you do to take care? Yes?
I put on my favorite CDs and sing along.
All right. I put on my favorite CDs and sing along. How beautiful. Neat. What throws you out of balance? Anybody? Lack of sleep. Yeah. Let's look at that a minute. When you have a really tight schedule, what's the first thing you do? Let's cut back on sleep. Oh, I'll just fit in another set of things to do. Sleep deprivation causes clinical depression. Sleep deprivation gets in the way of good judgment. Come on, talk to me. What throws you out of balance? Criticism, negative criticism. See, there's a difference between constructive criticism and constrictive criticism. And you know what? Lots of people don't know the difference. But when you criticize, it's by invitation. When you have a relationship of trust, and when you're going to stick around to pick up the pieces after what you share in someone's best interests, might just happen to kind of get to them just a little. But does the world operate that way? I run my mouth through certain filters. And lots of times I find that my own material is the reason I criticize someone else. Because what you don't like in yourself, you tend to find at fault with someone else. I'm asking you, what throws you out of balance? One more example. What throws you out of balance? Demands of other people, sure. And there are times when, in fact, the demands of other people are just so overwhelming that we can't possibly keep up with them. Have you ever seen people that come to work coughing all over everyone else, sicker than a dog, but they show up anyway? You know what? That is the height of egocentricity. It's as if someone in the universe died and put you in charge, and you're the only one that possibly can do it, and you have absolutely no confidence in the rest of your colleagues. Isn't that true sometimes? Maybe I'm being a little harsh. But maybe. Yeah, and I know that reality, but that balance is certainly something we've got to talk about long, long after this is over. And I want to suggest to you there are other handouts in the packet, and I promised John that I would end a little bit early because we kind of got out of balance in terms of time. But I'd like to just share one last strategy that's in your packet that's an awful lot of fun for those of you who've had grandchildren or maybe younger children, or you just feel like being a kid yourself. My husband and I used to do on the first day of spring a little strategy with the kids, things you love to do. We taught them concepts like mental health days, which I introduced to hospitals, and tried to teach my daughters, you've got a lot to get over. You got my genes, so you're going to have to learn to slow down and balance things. And these two lists, one by a little girl who was barely 3, and I'll share it with my friend that I met 2 days ago, Larry, and with a new colleague that I met at lunch. This little girl was about 6.5. Things you love to do. I just wanted them to pay attention. How do you fill your well? This little one that was 6, one of the first things on her list, she says, I like to go camping in the woods. Typical little kid, cognitive development. But we're working on spiritual development too in our family. My idea of camping in the woods is the Hyatt Regency, breakfast in bed, you know, that kind of thing. But you know, this is a child's quality of life, and you better have enough energy to meet her needs. Oh, further, much down the list, she said, I want to quit school, things you love to do. Chris, I got to deal with that, and I know she's 30 now and with her firstborn, but she wanted to quit school, things she loves to do. Oh, and then way down at the bottom of her list, but I'll bet you it will be top of her list as an exercise physiologist today, the notion of loving more. A 6-year-old saying, hi, this is what I love to do, and I want to do more of it. See, that little strategy in your packet says, what do you want to do more of, and what do you need to do less of? Oh, and the other little girl, she couldn't even write then, so her dad wrote things down for her as we coach our children to be holistic. I'll just tell you one example in the interest of time. She said, I want to blow out candles. Now that isn't too particularly profound, but you know what? This child had candles in her lasagna, candles in her Jell-O. My attitude is, if you know what you love to do and it fills you and nourishes you so you can give to other people, then fine. I was getting on the plane just before she was married, and she said, Mama, why is it that I find you out of town when I need you most? Ugh. Hurts, doesn't it? If it's an imbalance all the time, then you got a problem. If it's been a lifestyle. But it was a good balance in general. I said, sweetheart, what's on top? Which was our expression of cut to the chase, they're going to make me turn this thing off. What's on top, sweetheart? She says, well, I was talking to Grandma, and I was telling her about I wanted candles all over my wedding cake. See, my mother was more concerned with what the neighbors would think than what it means to be full of joy and what it means to commit to a man for the rest of your life. And if candles on your cake help make that day sacred. Oh, there was another issue. Should we marry in a chapel or marry at the beach? And she said, Mama, I'm quite sure Jesus Christ will be there. Don't you think it's okay? My mom comes from a different time, and you need to honor your grandparents. I said, sweetheart, I've got the t-shirt. It says, I'm the mother. Talk to me. She said, what do you think about candles on my cake? I said, sweetheart, if it makes that day sacred, and your promises are sacred, then fine, candles on your cake. A lot of people fault me because I never finished stories. She did not have candles on her cake. It was a delightful day when she married by the beach. The Lord more than showed up and continues to bless them richly as the community that was there to celebrate that and support them in that. Things you love to do. It's a strategy that is so simple, it's pitiful. It didn't begin in a psychology class. It began with a simple little strategy with a mom and a dad and some little kids in a classroom. I have used it with students that are burned out. And I've challenged them, leave your books in my office for midterm. I never require the paper the day after spring break. Why? All the medical students will be writing the paper the whole spring break. I say go home, spend time with your family, come back refreshed. I tell them the truth. Hi, you can turn in the paper anytime between when the course started and when it starts again. You have 1 year at Brown University to turn this paper in. I'd like it conveniently by May 15th, but that's beside the point. Because chances are you'll write a better ethics paper for me when you have time to think about all this, reflect on it, care for the caregiver, and know that you're called to care, but you've got to stay in balance. I'd like to close with a song. I think that it honors just about everything we've said at this conference in order that John can close the conference. And Tony's going to start that song for us. I hope you enjoy it.
I'm right here by
absolutely stunning, and in the interest of time, I'll just wane it down. There's also another song on that album called We Are Called, and it's a rallying song and a wonderful album. If you'd like to know how to get a hold of that, I can certainly give you that information. I do thank you for showing up this afternoon for this session, because I know it's the last one and you're tired. And I hope that it ministered to your spirit, as well as gave you some strategies and a little bit of rest. But more than anything, I thank you for the way that you minister to people and the call on your life through Christ. God bless you and Godspeed.